Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. A little late this week, sorry about that. Basically, it was my mom's birthday yesterday, and I went down east to get her some oysters. And it takes quite a while to, if y'all live near the coast, so, I grew up about half time in the mountains, half time on the coast. My grandfather built a beach house down in Brunswick County, and I mean, from the earliest age I can remember, he was taking me down there, picking oysters out of the bed, shucking them with his pocket knife, and teaching me to eat them raw. So, I'm an oyster fanatic. It's probably actually my favorite food. But anyway, I got our bushel oysters, and it takes quite a while, especially if you're a little out of practice, to wash and scrub and shuck a bushel of oysters. So, I'm looking at it 2 o'clock. I'm thinking, yeah, I'll probably get this done in an hour or so. And, 6 o'clock rolls around, and I'm still in there shucking oysters and roasting them and everything. Here's a good tip. Something I learned many, many years ago. Oysters in their raw state don't keep very long, and if you go to a fancy grocery store, your oysters are all going to be scrubbed up and clean and pristine, and they're really going to spoil actually very quickly. If you leave the mud on them, especially if you get oysters in clusters, which is my preference, leave the mud on them, they'll actually last about 2 weeks in the refrigerator. But they do start to smell a little funky after, say, 4 or 5 days. My preference is actually to clean the oysters real well because I want to save all the oyster liquor. I don't want to waste any of it, and I don't want any mud, low tide muck in there. So it's pretty nasty stuff. So what I'll actually do is, wash them and scrub them, and then roast them I use just the bottom half of a broiler pan, just a cheap roasting pan because they're going to stain the pan with the salt water and everything and scratch it up with the shells. I roast them about 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. That's just until they open. They're like par cooked. That's actually the way I prefer them. I like raw oysters. I like my oysters just barely cooked if I'm going to have them cooked. But save all the juice. Shuck them, scrape those oysters into a bowl, pour all the oyster liquor over them, pop them in the fridge, and then they'll keep really as long as I've never had any go bad. I probably haven't kept them probably 3 weeks in the fridge at the most. I mean, when I really had like several bushels of oysters I was dealing with, you're going to get about a gallon of oysters along with the oyster liquor out of a bushel of oysters on average. And, it's a lot. And oysters are, protein rich and you can really fill up on them fast. But in that state, you can eat them. They really rehydrate in the juice, so they're like raw, but they're like par cooked. So if you enjoy raw oysters, you'll probably like them like this. If you enjoy roasted oysters, you'll probably like them like this. If you enjoy your oysters, more roasted, roast them longer. This is just, this is the way I like them and the best way I think to store them. But you can take them in that state and just bread them and fry them up, and they're just like fried oysters. They're better, much better than canned oysters. You can once they've been I call it par roasted, I guess, and they're stored in their liqueur. You can freeze them, and they're far better than any kind of frozen oysters you're going to get at the store. I don't know why. I guess it's just easier for the big producers to do it the way they do it. Machine shucked or assembly line shucked, and then parboiled, and this works better because it's just like cooking meat on the bone. The shells have flavor, and it's really, really good. So anyway, that's a long way of getting around to saying I'm a day late on my podcast, but actually, I think I'm going to start doing my podcast Thursday instead of Wednesday. It just works better for my schedule. I hope James is okay with that. If not, he can tell me otherwise, and I'll go back to Wednesday. But I am going to stick with Thursday from now on, if I can, unless there's a scheduling conflict, and then I will try to do a Wednesday show. But I do my own podcast Monday through Wednesday, and then this is the podcast I do for the Prepper Broadcasting Network. So it's actually different. It's not the Southern Appalachian Herb podcast or the Uncensored Catholic podcast, which is what I do for myself. And just when I have to do 2 podcasts in a day, the time spent recording them may not be that long, but the time spent editing can be. And oftentimes I don't get my writing done that day. So I think I'm just going to shift it to Thursday, just make things easier for me. But let's get into this week's tree, medicinal trees. Remember, this comes from my book, The Medicinal Trees of the American Southeastern Herbalist Guide. And it's one that's not as common in my area, though we do have it. There's one in my backyard, in fact, the mountain alder. But the Alnus species, or alder, that's Alder, has a great deal of historic documented medicinal use. It's one of your more common trees in Europe, so a lot of use in Europe. So actually, there's 16 varieties that have documented use in herbal medicine, and some of them are Asian as well. There's some Japanese varieties, but let's see. Italian alder, Alnus glutinosa, Alnus hirsute, Alnus incontinus gray alder. I'll just go with that. Japanese alder, or Alnus japonica. Alnus maritima, that would be a seaside alder. Obviously, maritima is maritime or seaside. Alnus, Maximowiczi. I'm thinking it was a Polish guy who discovered that one. Maximowiczi. Alnus Nepalese alder. Aldus nintida, Aldus white alder, we'll just go with that. Red alder, speckled alder, smooth alder, Sitka alder, mountain alder, and American green alder. And actually, we have both the mountain alder and American green alder in the mountains. But actually, I think it's a little confusing, because I think what we call mountain alder is actually green alder, and we have another one that's called tag alder, Alnus cerulata. So anyway, they're pretty much used interchangeably, though. I'm not too worried about, an alder is kind of an alder. So the most common use of alder is the bark, and it's a source of salicylic acid, just like willow is. It's the base from which aspirin was created. People used willow bark, alder, meadowsweet, birch. That's all that comes to mind right now. But for centuries, probably thousands of years, before the Bayer Company ever figured out how to synthesize salicin and set into salicylic acid and make aspirin. That's probably not exactly the way it works chemically, but aspirin became a popular over-the-counter pain and anti-inflammatory medication once the Bayer Company began making the synthetic version. But it's been known, for as long as people have been around. It's anodyne, febrifuge, analgesic. Analgesic. That, of course, means it reduces pain, it reduces inflammation, and it can reduce fever. It's also emetic, meaning if you have too much, it'll make you throw up. It's astringent, meaning it tightens tissue. Hemostatic, stomatic, and tonic. That's the alder as opposed to salicylic acid. Salicylic acid, as you may know through aspirin, can irritate the stomach. This one actually has sort of a tonic, tonifying, good for digestion, in other words, good for the stomach, and good for the liver, and good for the blood. It's a blood thinner. I don't think I left anything out. All right, so St. Hildegard von Bingen said, if someone is a bit ulcerous on his skin, place new fresh leaves of this tree on the ulcers. During that time, it will become smoother. Now, St. Hildegard von Bingen, probably the greatest herbalist of all time, was writing around 1100 AD. They had no idea of the chemical properties of salicin. But she knew that if someone had a sore, a swelling, a red place on their skin, you could take the leaves of alder and sort of make a poultice with it and put it on there, and it would reduce the inflammation and irritation. Exactly what we know to be the properties of salicin. Gerard, the herbalist from 1500s England, said the leaves of alder are much used against hot swellings, ulcers, and all inward inflammations. especially the almonds or kernels of the throat, that's swollen glands, just under the jaw. The bark is much used in poor country. The bark is much used of poor country dyers for the dyeing of cloth, caps, hose, and such like, into a black color whereunto it serveth very well. Well, that's 1500s Elizabethan way of saying the bark's a really good dye. It was used a lot in early America and by Native Americans as a natural dye. Miss Grieve, writing in 1930s England, it says of its medicinal actions and uses, it is tonic and astringent. A decoction of the bark is useful to bathe swellings and inflammations, especially of the throat, and has been known to cure ague. Ague was fevers, specifically malarial fevers. So it was, again, the salicin properties of the plant were used to reduce fevers. Peasants in the Alps are reported to be frequently cured of rheumatism by being covered with bags full of the heated leaves. Now, that's an interesting use. I've never tried it. I'm sure it would be very good for arthritis. So we're talking severe arthritis, rheumatism. Rheumatism can also be stiff muscles. It doesn't just have to be aching joints, but inflammation. And they're using bags full of the heated leaves of alder. Horses, cows, sheep, and goat are said to eat it, but swine refuse it. Some state that it is bad for horses as it turns their tongues black. Probably not bad for them at all. In fact, the walnut, we'll get into walnut another time. Black walnut especially has some pretty strong vermifuge properties, meaning it helps get rid of intestinal worms. And the horses on my grandparents' farm every spring would eat the leaves off the black walnut trees. And the old folks said that they knew what they were doing. It would help keep them free of worms. So it would also, if I remember correctly, turn their tongues dark. But I could be just conflating the two in my head because I have not, I haven't been on my grandparents' farm for a very, very long time now. Very, very long time. More than 20 years and probably 30 since we had the horses. So you know how that goes. An Irish herbal states the bark or rind of it, because of its astringent quality, is useful against swellings of the throat. It heals and cauterizes sores and ulcers, and the leaves of it are made use of against ulcers and all kinds of inflammations. Brother Aloysius wrote of alder. He was, I think he was Swiss or German, I can't remember. He was Father Nape's protege. He said, alder bark is very rich in tannins, which makes it very astringent and febrifuge. The dose is 1/4 cup of powder in a glass of white wine taken in the morning on an empty stomach, while the patient is in bed, as this remedy causes excessive sweating. That's very good to know. Excessive sweating can also be a good thing. It can help break a fever. It can help flush the system. It's good to help with a lot of issues, actually. Decoction of alder is an excellent remedy for inflammation of the throat and tonsils. One should gargle 4 to 6 times a day with it. The fruit or alder buds should be picked in October and bottled in gin. 1 tablespoon taken twice a day is a recommended remedy against epilepsy. No idea. I don't know how or why or if that works, but that's part of German folk medicine. Probably worth a try. The bluish-colored buds picked in the spring, dried and taken in the form of tea, are highly recommended for rheumatism. The fresh leaves pounded and applied to ulcers, sores basically, take away the burning and cause them to suppurate and heal, to close up and heal. The alder was much used by Native Americans too. Herbal remedies of the Lumbee Indian states. A handful of the bark was peeled from the tree that was knotty and gnarled, and boiled down by the Lumbee healers to make a strong tea of a deep red color to reduce swellings and sprains, coughs, and skin eruptions. Aunt Cat Lowry, a Lumbee midwife and herbal expert, would recommend a tea made from red tag elder to nurse the pains of the mother related to the birthing process. Many healers thought an ingredient in this tea cleared milky urine. For drooping eyes, some healers would rub and blow the decoction of the bark into the eyes, or suggest a bark tea for general pain or heart trouble. Of course, salicin, thins the blood, helps prevent a heart attack sometimes. It helps with heart attack recovery. A hot berry tea was often prescribed to treat fever. Drinking a cold